Good afternoon. Welcome to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. My name is Leon Jones. Today's topic, I'm going to talk about the generation gaps in the black community. There are generation gaps in the black community. Now, I go through YouTube channels every day to watch different individual content. Some content is good, some content is poor. But one thing that I can tell you, when it comes to the younger generation, they're a little bit more up to date with the social media than myself. In fact, I've only been on YouTube since July 30th. I've only been on Facebook for 4 years. I still believe in the old-fashioned way of communicating. But I want to bring this to the African American community because one thing that is clear to me is that the older generation and the younger generation seem to be at odds at one another. The younger generation claims that the older generation hasn't done anything but failed the younger generation. Now, in essence, that's true. And that just depends on how you grew up. But you have to remember, the older generation had gone through more experiences, particularly during civil rights. The older generation has had to break different barriers down. But with the younger generation, here's the problem with them. They lack respect. Some of them are lazy. A number of them think they know everything. So you can't tell each other anything. You can't. You can't talk to them. And that has a result which is very negative. The younger and the older generations just don't want to deal with each other. Well, how do we make that disappear? Well, the easiest thing that I can tell you is the older generation, we must listen to what the younger generation has to say. Now, as long as the younger generation puts out information that makes sense, okay? What I mean by makes sense, if you have an idea, be willing to communicate it. And if some of the older people don't listen, those are the ones you don't deal with. And when it comes to the older generation, if you're trying to educate some of the young men and women about what is going on in the real world, see if they listen. I think both parties are at fault for not being able to communicate with one another. Because I can tell you right now, what goes on during the younger generation is because of some of what went on in the older generation. You have to realize that different environments are always passed down. Let me give you an example. When we talk about living in public housing, well, where did it all start? It started from the grandma, the mom, the daughter, and it's going to continue. Why? Because the older generation did not teach the younger generation about responsibility. In fact, if you look at Caucasian people, the difference between them and us, they believe in legacies. Yes, we've gone through racism. That's absolutely true. But what white folk do is collaborate with each other. Now, that's not all white folk. So I'm being general here because you have white folk who are at the bottom of the barrel as far as class, because with white folk, they have more of a class system, which class is close to be more on the racism side. Because white people believe in status. I see it at work all the time. Black people, we just been hindered by racism. But the problem with the older generation, we've done a lot of marching and a lot of talking. We've gotten some results. And that just depends on who you are. But there are areas where the older generation, and I'm talking about the baby boomer generation, which the baby boomer generation existed from 1944 to about 1964, and then my generation, which is the Generation X generation, which incidentally was the smaller generation because my generation started in 1965 and ended in 1982, and I happen to be born in 1965, so I'm 52 years old. I was at the beginning of the Generation X generation. Now, knowing my generation, that's when you saw the music like hip-hop. It's when the New Yorkers, they came out with the Run DMCs, the Curtis Blows, the Spoonie G's, the Sequences, the Grandmaster Flashes. The music was totally different. But going back to this younger generation, the problem with the younger generation is they don't know how to communicate via physical or real socialization. They don't have the skills, the social skills. Why? Because the younger generation has grown up with texting, social media, a lot more computers, calculators. So some of them have the inability to actually meet face to face. And this is the problem when you get into YouTube. Let's talk about social media, because this is where I see the collide between the generations, the old and the new, or the old and the young. When it comes to the younger folk, and I'm talking about African Americans, and this is true because I go around to different channels. Again, I watch multitudes of content. And when it comes to African Americans, it's clear to me that the channels that have more of the hate, the drama, the beefing back and forth, they seem to get a lot more views. Why? It's because we allow ourselves to be engulfed in drama. We think that's what's going to get us to the top. Some of us. Now, if you look at channels like mine, Reg the Bad Guys, Internet Granny, and a few others that I listen to on the older side of YouTube, our information, it gets views, but not as much. So, taking a step back, I look at the younger generation. They don't embrace education. It's boring to them. But in the long run, you need education to survive. Whether it's in school, whether it's on the job. And when social media has put us under the guise of being marketed by the big media conglomerates, that's what makes us look bad. And if you utilize social media in a way that's positive, and that's between both genders, or not genders, both generations, I believe that we can come together. Because I've heard some of the younger YouTubers say that older folks shouldn't be respected. They haven't done anything. But can I say the same thing about some of the younger folks? Certainly, because they don't respect. They don't understand structure. Again, they have this idea that they know everything, and they don't know everything. So when I look at the situation or the issue, there's fault on both sides. Now, the easiest way to turn that around is we have to collaborate. And you'll hear this word over and over and over and over again. We have to get our house in order. Because black folk, I'm just going to say this, we are more than just rappers, entertainers, ball players, and being used as a marketing tool for large media conglomerates to get rich off of us. If you look at black people, they can't tell me anything about Pythagorean theorem or Newtonian physics or engineering, but I can tell you something. They can tell me about the prancing elites, Atlanta housewives, all these other dramatic shows. Scandal, they know everything about that. And that's with this younger generation. Now, don't get me wrong. When hip hop first hit the scene commercially back in 1979, trust me, Generation X, most of us went to school, and when the Sugar Hill Gang came out with Rapper's Delight, somehow we knew all the words to Rapper's Delight, and there were some of us who couldn't do an algebra problem either. So if you look at the generations, there were things in common as well. And music had both generations who were listening to hip-hop music. And some of the words in hip-hop that influences the younger generation to behave in such a way that the behavior is more belligerent. What I mean by belligerent, it's warlike. It teaches us how to hate one another, and we shouldn't hate one another. Now, what I'm encouraging the older generation to do and the younger generation to do is listen to each other. And you young heads out there, you got to listen to people like Rashawn DeLay. He's been out there. I listen to him. And then we have to listen to some of what the younger generation is presenting as well. Because everybody in the younger generation is not a bad person. And everybody in the older generation is not a bad person. But we cannot allow ourselves to be used to make other people rich by poor behavior. And when I say other people, I'm talking about Maury Povich, Bill Cunningham, Jerry Springer, and other large media conglomerates. Because we're smart people as African Americans. This is why I try to put content out that is going to stimulate your mind so you can understand your history. You can understand the inventions that took place, just like the blood bank, the elevator, the cotton gin, the ironing board. And my job is to educate. Now, I have to be an example of what I'm educating or producing and presenting to the younger folk. Because if I'm ratchet, I can't expect someone in the younger generation to be professional. So I have to present myself very professionally and positive. And I have to take what I do on my YouTube channel very seriously. That's why I work on my speaking. I exercise. I mean, I've lost a lot of weight myself. I used to be bigger than this. I make sure that my grooming is up to bar, so when I get in front of the camera, I not only feel professional, but I look professional. Like I said, when it comes to my content, I try to deliver my content from a professional approach because I want everybody to know what I'm saying. Likewise, young folk, problem with some of them, they have a different style of delivering. Some of them sound like they hate. They hate black men and black women. And you look at that on the female side as well. Now, another difference, and I'm going to break down the genders. Even with this nonsense of a International Women's Day, there's one thing I will take from women. They stick together. The black women also support each other's channels. I've gone down and looked at the comments with all the females. Now, a number of women don't like each other, but when it comes time to pull a heavy object, and I'm just using the heavy object as a euphemism, they will all get together and pull that heavy object. When it comes to us, we don't do that. In fact, we get jealous of one another. And as black men, that's what makes us the laughing stock. And one thing I could say about men, for some reason, we're never interested in organizing because we have this belief that that's what women are supposed to do. But yet, when we don't organize, we start complaining about the laws like divorce and child support. The women don't complain. Not like we do. You know why? They support one another. They're not afraid to donate to each other's cause. And what happens to us as black men, we become a target two ways. We become a target of destruction because we destroy each other because of our envy and jealousy for one another. Then we become a target for making other YouTubers rich. And let's just talk about it with Crystalline Cares, and that's her name. She talks about swirling. Well, if you dig deep into Beyond Black and White, yes, she's giving lectures to African American women to have options in dating. That's not a problem. But that's not what the real issue is. What she's doing is very smart because she is marketing. She's using that issue of telling African American women to expand on your options or explore your options. She makes money off of doing that marketing. She has a website. That's good business sense. Now, you don't have to agree with what she does. You don't have to agree with what anybody does. But one thing that must be understood is when we utilize social media, we have to utilize it much better than I have seen. We don't need to be going on Instagram, particularly the sisters are doing this, letting everybody see your body. You're worth more than being a porn star. African American women are very beautiful, but what taints them is their behavior. I got to tell your sister something. What you hear about your weight and the kids out of wedlock, yeah, those are preferences of men. But let me be honest with your sisters from a brother standpoint. It's not your weave that bothers us. There are men out there who are taking care of women who have other men's children. Okay? Now it's a preference of any man. It's not your weight. Some of us like BBWs. And I know I'm one of them who does like BBWs, as long as they are voluptuous and built type BBWs and not out of shape BBWs. I'm just being honest. It's not your makeup. All that we talk about, it's your attitude. If you have a better attitude toward the decent brothers and don't hang around bad brothers, and I have to put the men in, and I'll talk about the men in a second, we'll be able to appreciate you a lot more. But it's also up to us as men. We tend to blame women for this. But we got to pick better women ourselves. And in order for us to pick better women, we have to have ourselves in order. In other words, we must be able to take care of ourselves. We don't need to be living in mama's basement. We need to be working. We need to do something that gives us the advantage in the marketplace, like having a business. Because brothers, you spend more money chasing women, and you get a big goose egg at the end. We need to spend less time chasing women and focusing on ourselves. And that way, we'll be better men. But looking at women and men, we got to pick better women as well. And women, you got to pick better men as well. And we can't be superficial. We can have our preferences. That's fine. But going back to the generations, apologize if I got off topic a little bit. I just think the older generation and the younger generation of African American people, we have to do a better job at trying to come together. First, the younger generation should listen to the older generation. And I'm talking about individuals from the older generation who have produced something, who have shown that they are responsible people. And for me, I'd like somebody of the younger generation to listen to me and not think someone who has education is boring. I came from those streets as well. I know how it is out there. Brother Real Dale from Gary, Indiana. He came from the streets. He understands what's going on out there. A lot of us do. What I'm asking, particularly in the social media sector, is for black men and black women of like minds now. I want to put it down there. Because in order to have any type of community, you must have like minds. And this is the philosophy that I'll take from white folk, because all white folk don't have like minds. You see what happens to white folk when there's trash. What do they do with the trash? They out the trash. In other words, all of your miscreants in the white community don't live in the affluent area. And that's what we should do as black people. And I'm not talking about the hood or the suburbs. I'm just talking about in a community that we have like minds to where we can grow economically, socially, and politically, and we can have our own. And that's what the two genders should be talking about. The two generations should be talking about. We always talk about the negative of what each generation has never done, but we never talk about the positive of what we can do. See, sometimes you have to take everything that you disagree with and throw it out. We can work on that, but we have to take what we have in common and discuss. And this is one thing that can help us learn the power of disagreement and dialogue. See, African Americans, even in your own generation, and whether it's old or young, we don't know how to disagree. We just don't do it. And again, we have too much of that monolithic thinking. We always do what we're told by white supremacy. And what I mean by white supremacy, again, I'm talking about the elites with the money who have the influence to utilize their resources to have laws made to benefit them. We don't have that. What we have to do between the baby boomer generation, the Generation X, the Generation Y, and the millennials is we need to hear each other out. Now, we do need to come face to face and hear from the younger generation of where we failed, because we can learn something as well. And I always said, you can teach an old dog new tricks if that old dog is willing to learn. But a young dog, if they're not willing to learn either, you have to throw them out. First, we have to start with listening to one another. And when it comes to social media, we have to stop supporting drama and start supporting more positive information. There is no reason why so many older channels don't get the support that so many younger channels who produce a lot of drama. And you have some young brothers like Conscious Effort. He started, I look at his channel, very positive information. But he doesn't get the views and he doesn't get the subscribership because a number of African Americans are encased in drama. The drama gets all of the views and the subscriptions. If you go on Instagram, if you show yourself half naked, if you're half naked, you're swearing, you're cursing, you get the views. If you're on Facebook Live, you're waving a gun in your hand, you get the views. In other words, both generations, we have to stop embarking on the negative. Now, we're not going to fix everybody in the black community. It's not going to happen. But what we can do is capture the individuals from all of the generations who are still living to come to a consensus that we need to support each other. Because one thing that we're missing from the African American community is a lack of structure. And yes, some of us come from two-parent households, some of us don't. But what we do have in common is we should be able to have dialogue. And we can't have dialogue. Again, going back to social media. We're going to have disagreements. I know YouTubers like Tommy Sotomayor, they present information and content that is going to upset people. But there's truth to what he says. Same with Ringo TV Raw. I produce my information from a little bit more humble. But there's truth to what I say. So does Internet Granny, Brother Rashawn DeLay, Sandy Pooh, Karen Kennedy, Matt Coley, Tobias Orion, Jared Haggerty, the Angry Man, O'Shea Jackson. With all of us in the black sector who have YouTube channels up, who have Facebook channels, who have LinkedIn channels or pages, Twitter pages, what we have to do is come together to support each other. It's okay to have some fun, crack jokes, because you want to support some entertainment. That gives you a relief from the everyday stresses that go on in the real world. I'll tell you, black people, when we step out here in the real world, it's a war out here, and we know it. But one thing I can tell you about us as black people, we're resilient. No matter what comes at us, we seem to take it very well, and we move on. But the problem with us, we've said yes, and yes to other people, not our own. We treat other people better than we treat ourselves, and you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Caucasian man and woman. We put them more on a pedestal than ourselves. And that makes us look unimportant to each other. Black men and black women were very important to each other. But the bottom line is we really have to continue to wake up. Now, we are waking up, but we have some work to do. And one thing I will urge everybody on YouTube to do, we can have our preferences on who we'll date. We can have our preferences on what kind of content we're going to deliver. But one common ground we should definitely have is we should be able to teach each other something. And I'm talking about the older generation and the younger generation, and respect each other's views. Now, I know in social media you're always going to have, particularly on YouTube, you're going to have some trolls that come on your page. Welcome the trolls as well. I had a couple come on my page. I don't delete the comments. I ignore it. Now, if a person starts to come out personal, I'm going to strike back. That's what I'm supposed to do. But the trolls come, they give you views. They rate your videos. And in social media, you want people to like and support your page as well. On Facebook and Twitter, you want followers. The good thing about social media, it's a networking tool. So I'm just urging all of us African Americans, when we utilize social media, number one, we got to be careful. Don't get all of our information out. And let's stop arguing with each other over something silly. And let's stop being a market tool for rich people. And I'm talking about your media conglomerates. Because the result, if we keep making someone else rich, we're going to continue to be at the bottom. We already think monolithically, so first order of business, let's support one another. Now, this is not a kumbaya, this is just realistic. It's what we have to do. We may never have the perfect community. No community is perfect. But we need to start off and respect each other. And social media is where we should start to network with one another. Not just talk about it, but actually doing it. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show for today, Friday, March 10th, 2017. You can tune in to the 401 Talk Zone radio show every Monday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio. Guest calling number is 215-383-5785. And if you like my videos, please share and subscribe to the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube so I can continue to give you quality information for educational purposes from a professional and mature perspective. Now, on this channel, I don't engage in debates, controversy, or emotion, nor do I participate in drama or unnecessary bickering. Number one, it's counterproductive, it's negative, and number two, we don't need any more ruckus between each other. We already go through enough. So my job is try to educate. Whether you're 18 or 88, we all need a little improvement in our lives. And I want you to understand that my job is to give the younger generation the tools so they can produce in the real world, because they are our future leaders. And old heads out there, take some advice. Learn how to use some of this social media. It can also help you when it comes to being entrepreneurs and communicate as well. But we all must understand that communication should be face-to-face. So we can't allow technology to override us either. Remember, knowledge is power. And if you have a sort of topic or YouTube channel, please email me at lej6521@gmail.com. If you have a comment, please leave it in the comment section. Make sure that your comments are pithy. No bloviating, pettifogging, or filibustering if you wish to opine. That's it for this video. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Remember, please be gentle and respectful with each other, and have a wonderful and blessed day.